Hello, LMH. Welcome to chapel. I miss seeing you all in the halls and in the classroom and in chapel. I miss hearing you sing. I miss hearing your stories and your laughter. But when we can't be together, we do the next best thing and we find ways to connect even online. Today for chapel, I want to talk about a character from history who I find to be very inspiring, especially in times like this. Julian of Norwich was born in 1342 in Norwich, England, during medieval times, during the Middle Ages. We don't know much about her early life, but we know that when she was about 6 years old, the plague, which had been raging through Europe, came to Norwich, and that at least half of the population of the city, a very thriving city, at least half of the population died during the plague. We also know that this was a time during feudalism when the peasants were revolting. There was a revolt called the Peasants' Revolt that happened around Norwich at the time that she was growing up, which was brutally put down by the lords and the knights. And so there was this anxiety of violence and civil unrest along with plague as she was growing up. We don't know if her family survived the plague. We know that she was raised in Carrow Priory, which was an abbey. She was raised by nuns, educated by nuns as a child. And it may be that she was orphaned as a child and sent there. Or it may be that her parents were, as part of their devotion, offered their child to the church. Or it may be that they wanted to isolate her from further possible outbreaks of plague. We don't know. But we do know from her writings that when she was 30 years old, she became very sick and she almost died. In fact, she was on her deathbed. The priest was there, was giving her the last rites, as they do in the Catholic Church. And she looked at the crucifix he had in his hand as she was feeling her spirit leave her body. And she received visions from Jesus, which she called her showings of the Passion of Christ. Shortly after she recovered, she wrote about these visions, and then as she lived the rest of her life, she extended and expanded on these writings and reflected on these writings, and they became compiled into what became known as the Revelations of Divine Love. And this book, The Revelations of Divine Love, was the first book written in English by a woman. One of the most well-known statements that comes out of this book was the words that she said Jesus spoke to her on her deathbed. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Julian was an anchorite in the church, which means she lived in a cell, a little room, which was attached to the Church of St. Julian. She was given a ceremony, which was like a funeral, in which she relinquished her ties to the world, and then the door behind her, as she went into this room attached to the church, the door was walled up. There was a window in the room, so she could look out into the church sanctuary and receive the Eucharist. There were windows into outside, from what I understand, where she could talk to people passing by. It's rumored that she had a cat. And that there are provisions in wills from people from the local time that provided for a serving girl not for Saint Julian, she wasn't a saint, but for Julian of Norwich, so that her daily needs could be taken care of. There are also records of her offering counsel to people. But I think of Julian of Norwich, particularly right now, because we too are living through a time of pandemic and a time of uncertainty. We too are experiencing a different sort of isolation than the kind of chosen isolation which she lived. And I think of the comforting words that she gave us. She lived a life marked by sadness and loss and anxiety, likely losing loved ones, many loved ones, much of her community in the plague. And yet she found comfort in these visions which she received, and she passed that comfort on to others. Her writings were primarily about the love, the undying, unconditional love of God. Very poetic writing in which she pulled on texts from Isaiah and elsewhere in the Bible about the motherly love of God and the deep, deep understanding that she had of the divine. I want to leave you with some of the words of Julian of Norwich here at the end. A couple of the things she wrote in Revelations of Divine Love. God loved us before he made us, and his love has never diminished and never shall. Here's one in a fairly old-fashioned form of writing, but listen closely. He said not, "Thou shalt not be tempested, thou shalt not be travailed, thou shalt not be diseased," but he said, "Thou shalt not be overcome." I love that because, right, it's not that we won't have trouble, but that we'll get through it. Another one sort of like that. If there is anywhere on earth a lover of God who is always kept safe, I know nothing of it, for it was not shown to me. But this was shown, that in falling and rising again, we are always kept in that same precious love. Isn't that beautiful? Here's another one. Deeds are done which appear so evil to us, and people suffer such terrible evils that it does not seem as though any good will ever come of them. And we consider this, sorrowing and grieving over it, so that we cannot find peace in blessed contemplation of God as we should do. And this is why. Our reasoning powers are so blind now, so humble, and so simple, that we cannot know the high, marvelous wisdom, the might and the goodness of the Holy Trinity. And this is what he means, where he says, "You shall see for yourself that all manner of things shall be well." As if he said, pay attention to this now, faithfully and confidently, and at the end of time you will see it in the fullness of joy. I love this little one about an image she got during her revelations. And in this he showed me a little thing, the quality of a hazelnut lying in the palm of my hand, as it seemed, and it was as round as any ball. And I looked upon it with the eye of my understanding and thought, what may this be? And it was answered generally thus, it is all that was made. I marveled how it might last, for I thought it might suddenly have fallen to nothing for littleness, and I was answered in my understanding, it lasts and ever shall, for God loves it. And so have all things their beginning by the love of God. In this little thing I saw three properties. The first is that God made it, the second that God loves it, and the third that God keeps it. And another one. Any time we look at our Maker with love, our importance in our own eyes diminishes, and we are filled with awe and humility and love for others. So I leave you here with that last reminder as we go about our week, as we think about the things. We'll let the sadness come when the sadness comes, but know that all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Go in peace. I miss you. Hope to see you all again soon.